I was sitting in my new apartment surrounded by boxes I had not yet unpacked when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Sarah. I smiled slightly as I read, "Why did the tuition payment stop?" Without hesitation, I typed back, "Thought I never gave this family anything." That simple response felt like closing a chapter that had been draining me for 3 long years. Let me tell you how one explosive argument with my father changed everything. Before I share this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever felt like your contributions went unnoticed or unappreciated, hit that like button, because you will definitely relate to what happened next. Subscribe for more real family stories that will make you think twice about boundaries and self-worth, and stay tuned to discover how a single moment of standing up for myself completely transformed my family dynamics. My name is Jillian, and at 28 years old, I worked as a software engineer in Austin, Texas. My family consisted of my father, Robert, 55, my mother, Linda, 52, my sister, Sarah, 22, and finishing her senior year at University of Texas, and my brother, Marcus, 19, and in his second year at Austin Community College. 3 years ago, everything changed when my mother lost her job due to company bankruptcy. The factory where she had worked for 15 years simply closed its doors one Friday afternoon, leaving 700 employees without income or benefits. I watched my parents struggle with mounting bills and the crushing weight of supporting 2 college students on my father's modest salary as a mechanic at a local auto shop. That was when I quietly stepped in to help. Every month, I transferred $15,000 for Sarah's tuition at University of Texas. The amount made my stomach clench each time I sent it, but I knew how much her education meant to our family. Sarah was the first in our family to attend a 4-year university, and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian felt sacred to all of us. For Marcus, I covered $8,000 annually for his community college expenses. He was studying automotive technology, following somewhat in our father's footsteps, but with hopes of eventually opening his own specialized repair shop. His enthusiasm for learning made every payment feel worthwhile. Beyond tuition, I sent $1,200 monthly to help with living expenses. Groceries, utilities, gas money, unexpected repairs. I tried to anticipate their needs before they became desperate situations. The family's health insurance alone cost $600 per month, another bill I quietly absorbed after my mother lost her coverage. Every weekend, I drove the 30 minutes from my apartment to their house in a modest neighborhood where I had grown up. I would arrive with bags of groceries from Whole Foods, carefully chosen snacks that I knew each family member loved, and small gifts that brought smiles to their faces. For Sarah, I brought the expensive textbooks she needed but could not afford. For Marcus, I supplied the specialized tools required for his automotive courses. I helped Sarah with coding assignments late into the night, drawing on my professional experience to guide her through complex programming concepts. When she struggled with her computer science electives, I patiently explained algorithms and data structures until everything clicked. I also spent hours helping her search for internship opportunities and reviewing her resume until it perfectly highlighted her potential. With Marcus, I taught him to drive my reliable Honda Accord through empty parking lots on Sunday afternoons. When he was ready for his driving test, I paid the fees and drove him to the DMV celebrating with ice cream when he passed on his first attempt. I bought him his first set of professional automotive tools for his birthday expensive snap-on wrenches that would last his entire career. The most important thing was that I never mentioned money in front of my family. I understood how proud my father was, how much he wanted to be the provider and protector. I knew that acknowledging our financial arrangement would humiliate him and potentially damage our relationship beyond repair. My father, Robert, was a hardworking man with an enormous sense of pride. He had provided for our family for decades, and the recent financial strain wore heavily on his shoulders. He often worked overtime and picked up weekend jobs, pushing his aging body to its limits, trying to make ends meet. His stress manifested in shorter temper and longer periods of worried silence. My mother, Linda, was gentle and nurturing, but had always deferred to my father in major decisions. She preferred to keep peace rather than confront uncomfortable situations. I suspected she knew about my financial contributions, but chose not to discuss them with Robert, understanding how it might wound his pride. Sarah was brilliant and driven, but had developed a sense of entitlement about being supported. She was naturally confident and sometimes forgot to appreciate the sacrifices being made for her education. To her, the steady flow of money for tuition and expenses had become expected rather than remarkable. Marcus was still young and carefree, focused on his studies and social life, without fully grasping the financial pressures surrounding him. He was sweet-natured and fun-loving, but lacked the maturity to understand adult responsibilities. His innocence was both endearing and occasionally frustrating. The first signs of growing tension appeared during a family meeting about Sarah's desire to change her major from pre-veterinary studies to computer science. This switch would require an additional year of coursework and significantly more money for specialized classes and equipment. During that Sunday dinner, my father's forehead creased with worry lines as he calculated the financial implications. He rubbed his temples and spoke slowly. "I do not know how we can afford another year, Sarah. We are already stretched beyond our limits." When I quietly offered to help cover the additional costs, my father cut me off sharply. "Jillian, you need to worry about your own future. You cannot keep trying to solve our problems. Just focus on taking care of yourself." His words stung because I was already taking care of them, but I could not say that without destroying his dignity. I nodded silently and changed the subject, but the uncomfortable moment lingered in the air like smoke from a burnt dinner. The misunderstandings began to pile up like autumn leaves. My father watched me drive up in my reliable car and live in my comfortable apartment, assuming I was living lavishly while they struggled. He did not know that I had chosen a modest one-bedroom place and drove a practical vehicle specifically so I could afford to help them. He saw what appeared to be a carefree single woman with disposable income, not someone sacrificing her own comfort for family. I maintained my silence about the financial support because I believed it was the kindest choice. I thought I was protecting my father's feelings and preserving family harmony. Instead, my secrecy was creating a growing resentment that I could not see coming. Sarah and Marcus would sometimes complain about money in front of me, wishing aloud that they had more spending money or newer laptops for school. These comments felt like pins in my chest because I was already giving everything I could spare. They had no idea that their textbooks, their meal plans, their dorm fees were coming from my savings account rather than our parents' budget. My mother, Linda, knew more than she revealed but felt trapped between protecting her husband's pride and acknowledging her daughter's generosity. She would sometimes give me grateful looks when I brought groceries or paid for family dinners, but she never spoke about it directly. Her silence, while well-intentioned, allowed the misunderstandings to grow larger. The breaking point began with Marcus's car accident. He was driving to his evening classes when another driver ran a red light and clipped the rear of his old Ford pickup truck. Nobody was seriously injured, but the truck needed $2,000 worth of repairs to be safely drivable again. My father stared at the estimate with defeat in his eyes. "We do not have this kind of money right now. Marcus will have to take the bus until we can save up enough." I could not bear watching my brother lose his transportation and potentially miss classes because of money I could easily provide. That evening, I called the garage directly and arranged to pay the repair bill in full. I thought I was being discreet and helpful. When my father discovered what I had done, his reaction was explosive. "Why would you go behind my back like this? Do you think I cannot take care of my own son? This is exactly the kind of showing off that I cannot stand." I tried to explain that I only wanted to help, that I knew he was capable, but that sometimes families needed to support each other. My words only seemed to make him angrier. He accused me of making him look like a failure in front of the mechanic, of treating him like a charity case who could not handle his responsibilities. The pressure was building in ways I did not fully recognize. My father's pride was being wounded repeatedly, and I was unknowingly contributing to his feelings of inadequacy. Every time I tried to help, he saw it as evidence of his own failure as a provider. I was growing exhausted from the emotional weight of supporting my family while pretending not to. The constant vigilance required to help without being obvious was draining my energy. I felt like I was living a double life, successful and generous in private, but forced to act oblivious to their struggles in public. The night that changed everything started like any other family dinner. I had driven over to discuss Sarah's need for a new laptop for her senior project in computer science. Her old machine was barely functioning, constantly crashing during important assignments and making her academic work nearly impossible. The atmosphere at dinner felt heavier than usual. My father had been working double shifts all week, and the exhaustion showed in his slumped shoulders and distant stare. My mother kept glancing nervously between him and the stack of bills sitting on the kitchen counter. Sarah seemed oblivious to the tension as she chatted about her upcoming graduation and job prospects. As we ate my mother's carefully budgeted meatloaf dinner, Sarah casually mentioned that her roommate Jennifer had just received a brand new MacBook Pro from her parents for her birthday. It is so fast and has all the latest software already installed. I cannot even imagine having something that nice for my projects. I saw my father's jaw tighten at the comment. His fork paused halfway to his mouth, and I could sense the familiar spiral of shame and inadequacy beginning in his mind. He was comparing himself to Jennifer's father, measuring his ability to provide against someone else's financial capacity. "Sarah, you need to appreciate what you have," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warning tone. "Not everyone can afford to buy expensive computers for their children." Sarah, missing the tension entirely, continued enthusiastically about the laptop's features and how much it would help with her coding assignments. Each word seemed to press against my father's growing frustration, like salt in a wound. That was when I made my critical mistake. I cleared my throat and said gently, "Actually, I was thinking we could look at getting you a new laptop for graduation. I have been saving up some money, and I would love to help with something that important for your future." The silence that followed felt like the moment before thunder crashes. My father slowly set down his fork and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. His eyes held a mixture of rage, humiliation, and deep hurt that made my stomach drop. "All you do is take, take, take." He exploded, his voice rising to a volume that made my mother flinch. "You have never given this family anything. Look at you sitting there in your designer clothes, living in your fancy apartment, driving your nice car while we struggle to keep our heads above water." The words hit me like physical blows. I wanted to defend myself, to list every payment I had made, every sacrifice I had quietly endured. But something in his face told me that the truth would only make things worse. "You come here every week with your pity gives and your condescending offers to help, like you are some kind of savior," he continued, his face reddening with each word. "You judge us for not being able to afford the things you take for granted. You make me feel like a failure in my own home." My mother reached across the table toward him, whispering, "Robert, please calm down. Jillian is just trying to help." "Help?" He laughed bitterly. "This is not help, Linda. This is showing off. This is our successful daughter reminding us how inadequate we are as parents. If you had any pride left, Jillian, you would leave us alone instead of judging us for not measuring up to your standards." Sarah sat frozen in her chair, her fork suspended in midair, clearly shocked by the intensity of our father's outburst. Marcus had stopped eating entirely and was staring at his plate, his young face pale with discomfort. The happy family dinner had transformed into a battlefield in a matter of minutes. I felt something break inside me as I listened to his words. 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of quiet support, 3 years of putting my family's needs before my own dreams, and this was how he saw my efforts. I was not a daughter who loved them enough to give up vacations, expensive clothes, and my own financial security. I was a judgmental outsider, flaunting my success and highlighting their failures. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. I picked up my purse with steady hands, though inside I felt like I was shattering into pieces. "You are right, Dad," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly calm despite the storm raging in my chest. "I will leave you alone." I walked toward the door while my family watched in stunned silence. My mother called my name weakly, but I did not turn around. Sarah started to say something, but the words died in her throat. Marcus looked like he wanted to follow me, but remained frozen in his seat. As I reached the front door, I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Part of me hoped my father would call me back, would realize what he had just done, and apologize. Instead, I heard him mutter to the others, "Maybe now she will understand what it feels like to be on her own." I closed the door gently behind me and walked to my car with measured steps. I sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, letting the reality of what had just happened wash over me. Then I drove home to my apartment and began making the phone calls that would change everything. The first call was to my bank, where I canceled all automatic transfers to accounts associated with my family. The second was to University of Texas, where I removed myself as the authorized payer for Sarah's tuition. The third was to the insurance company, where I removed my family from my policy effective at the end of the month. Each phone call felt like cutting a rope that had been holding up a bridge. I was systematically removing every financial support I had provided, knowing that the consequences would be immediate and devastating. But my father's words echoed in my mind. "You have never given this family anything." If that was truly how they saw my contributions, then perhaps it was time for them to discover what life looked like without those contributions. The first week after I left my family's house passed in a strange haze of determination and heartbreak. I had rented a small apartment across town, deliberately choosing a place where I was unlikely to encounter anyone from my family accidentally. I needed space to process what had happened and to resist the urge to return to my old patterns of silent support. Moving my belongings felt symbolic of the larger changes I was making in my life. Each box I packed represented another step away from the role I had played for 3 years. I was no longer the invisible financial backbone of my family, and the freedom felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I changed my phone number and deleted my old social media accounts, creating a clean break from my previous life. I wanted to force myself to build new relationships and rediscover interests that had been pushed aside while I focused on supporting others. For the first time in years, I was thinking about what I wanted rather than what my family needed. During those early days, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. Without the constant financial drain of supporting my family, I had more money to invest in my own professional development. I enrolled in advanced coding courses and began contributing to open source projects that interested me. My career, which had been stagnating while I focused on family obligations, suddenly began to flourish. I also started making new friends among my colleagues. Without the exhaustion of managing family financial crises, I had energy to accept social invitations and explore Austin's vibrant tech community. I discovered that I genuinely enjoyed rock climbing, joined a book club, and even started taking painting classes on weekends. Meanwhile, my family was beginning to face the reality of life without my hidden support system. The first crisis came exactly 1 week after I moved out, when Sarah received a notice from the university that her tuition payment for the final semester was past due. Late fees were accumulating daily, and she was in danger of being dropped from her classes just months before graduation. Sarah's initial response was confusion rather than panic. She had become so accustomed to tuition appearing magically paid that she assumed there had been some administrative error. She spent 2 days calling the financial aid office and arguing with billing representatives before the truth began to dawn on her. When she finally called me, her voice was tight with worry. "Jill, there is some kind of mistake with my tuition payments. The school says nobody has paid for this semester, but that cannot be right. Can you help me figure out what happened?" I looked at my new phone displaying her number and felt a complex mixture of love and sadness for my sister. She genuinely had no idea where her tuition money had been coming from. In her mind, education expenses were simply handled by some combination of our parents and financial aid, with the details remaining mysteriously unclear. "Sarah," I said gently, "there is no mistake. The payments stopped because I stopped making them." The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was much smaller. "What do you mean you were making them? I thought Dad was paying my tuition." "I have been paying your tuition for 3 years," I explained. "I have also been paying Marcus's college expenses, the family health insurance, and sending money every month to help with groceries and bills. But Dad told me I never gave this family anything, so I decided to stop giving." I could hear Sarah crying softly on the other end of the line. "Jillian, I had no idea. Why did you never tell us? How could we have been so blind?" The conversation continued for over an hour as I explained the full extent of my financial support. Sarah was genuinely shocked to learn that I had been covering her textbooks, lab fees, parking passes, and even her meal plan supplements. She had assumed these expenses were being handled by our parents or were somehow included in her basic financial aid package. 2 weeks later, Marcus called with similar panic in his voice. He had been dropped from all his classes for non-payment and was facing the prospect of losing an entire semester of progress toward his automotive technology degree. Unlike Sarah, Marcus broke down completely during our conversation. "I am so sorry, Jillian," he sobbed into the phone. "I never knew what you were doing for us. I just thought Dad was taking care of everything somehow. Please, can we talk about this? I feel terrible about what happened at dinner." My heart ached listening to my younger brother's distress, but I knew that rescuing him again would only perpetuate the cycle that had brought us to this point. "Marcus, I love you, but you all need to figure out how to handle these responsibilities without me." That is what Dad wanted. The health insurance cancellation hit my parents particularly hard. My mother had been managing a chronic condition that required monthly medication costing over $600. When she went to pick up her prescription and discovered her coverage had been terminated, she finally understood the scope of what I had been providing. My father was forced to take on additional work to cover the family's basic expenses. He picked up weekend shifts at a different auto shop and began doing freelance repair work from our garage in the evenings. The physical toll was obvious, but the emotional impact seemed even greater as he slowly realized how much his pride had cost his family. One month after I had walked out of their house, my phone rang with Sarah's number again. This time, her voice was thick with tears from the moment she spoke. Jillian, everything is falling apart. I might not be able to graduate because I cannot pay the remaining tuition. Marcus lost his entire semester. Mom is rationing her medication because they cannot afford it. Dad is working 7 days a week and barely sleeping. I felt the familiar tug of wanting to fix their problems, but I forced myself to remain firm. I am sorry you are going through this, Sarah. It sounds very difficult. Please, she continued. We understand now what you were doing for us. We were wrong about everything. Can you please help us figure out how to fix this? That was when I sent the text message that would become the turning point. I thought I never gave this family anything. The response was immediate and devastating. Sarah called back within minutes, completely broken. We know that is not true. We know we were blind and ungrateful. We know Dad was wrong about everything he said. Please, is there any way we can make this right? But I was not ready to return to being their financial safety net. Instead, I suggested they have an honest family meeting about their situation and develop a realistic plan for moving forward without depending on me. I offered to meet with them in a month to discuss rebuilding our relationship, but only if they had demonstrated they could handle their responsibilities independently. The month that followed was transformative for my entire family. My father was forced to confront the reality that his pride had driven away the daughter who had been quietly supporting them for years. He began attending financial counseling sessions and developed a realistic budget for the family's needs. Sarah applied for emergency financial aid and took on a part-time job tutoring computer science students. She also moved to a cheaper apartment and gave up many of the small luxuries she had taken for granted. The experience taught her to appreciate every dollar and to understand the value of hard work. Marcus re-enrolled at the community college and began working at a local garage to pay his own expenses. The combination of education and hands-on experience actually accelerated his learning and gave him valuable connections in the automotive industry. My mother returned to work at a local grocery store and began advocating for herself in ways she had never done before. She researched assistance programs for her medical expenses and found a patient advocacy group that helped her access her medications at reduced cost. Most importantly, they all began talking openly about money and responsibilities instead of letting financial stress remain an unspoken burden. The crisis had forced them to develop communication skills and coping strategies that made them stronger as a family unit. When I finally agreed to meet with them after 6 weeks apart, the reunion was unlike anything I had expected. My father, looking thinner and more tired but somehow more at peace, spoke first. Jillian, I owe you the biggest apology of my life, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I was so caught up in feeling like a failure that I could not see what an incredible daughter you are. You gave us everything, and I was too proud and too blind to recognize it. The conversation that followed lasted for hours. For the first time in our family's history, we discussed money openly and honestly. I learned about my father's deep fears of inadequacy and his struggle to adapt to changing economic realities. He learned about my 3 years of sacrifice and my own dreams that I had postponed to support them. We established new boundaries that protected both my financial security and my father's dignity. I agreed to help with true emergencies, but only after they had exhausted other options and asked directly, rather than expecting silent support. They committed to managing their regular expenses independently and communicating openly about financial challenges before they became crises. Sarah graduated on schedule after receiving a partial scholarship and working extra hours to cover her remaining expenses. Marcus excelled in his automotive program and was offered a paid apprenticeship with a local dealership. My parents developed a sustainable budget and began rebuilding their emergency savings. The experience taught all of us that love is not about endless sacrifice or silent suffering. Real love involves setting healthy boundaries, communicating honestly, and allowing people to grow through facing their own challenges. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to step back and let them discover their own strength. Looking back now, I realize that my father's angry words, as hurtful as they were in the moment, ultimately freed both of us from an unsustainable dynamic. His explosion of frustration forced our family to confront truths we had been avoiding and to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than hidden resentment. The most important lesson I learned was that my worth as a daughter was never dependent on my bank account. I had spent 3 years trying to prove my love through financial support, but real love is about being present, honest, and willing to have difficult conversations when relationships go off track. Today, my relationship with my family is stronger than it has ever been. We see each other regularly, but our interactions are based on genuine affection rather than financial obligation. My father has regained his sense of purpose and pride through successfully managing his family's needs. My siblings have developed independence and work ethic that will serve them throughout their lives. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them realize what they truly had all along. In my case, walking away from my role as the family's financial savior allowed all of us to discover that our love for each other was strong enough to survive without money holding us together. What started as the worst family argument of my life became the catalyst for the most honest and healthy relationships we had ever shared. Sometimes you have to break something completely before you can rebuild it properly, and that is exactly what happened to us. Have you ever been in a situation where your generosity was taken for granted or misunderstood? I would love to hear about your experiences with family boundaries and how you handled them in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear about the importance of setting healthy limits with the people we love. Subscribe to hear more real stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding the courage to stand up for yourself when it matters most. Remember that sometimes the people who love you most need to learn how to appreciate what they have, and there is nothing wrong with helping them discover that appreciation. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the strength to value yourself as much as you value others.